All right, so for question E, we want to construct the 95 percentile confidence interval, all right? And we get the values 10% of alcohol and 0.09 chlorides, right? Now, in your book, in section 14.1, this is the work that you are supposed to do, right? However, they did not specifically say how to get this one, x prime times x, which is this matrix. All right, and it's kind of difficult to follow through this table, but anyways, I'm gonna redo the same work, all right, on Excel. So you should cover everything here, and we should end up with the same numbers. Just to remind you that this is the formula, and I don't think they mentioned it in your book neither. They did the work, but they did not mention the formula. Anyways, so the confidence interval is going to be between these two variables here, this one here and this one over here, right? So that's the minimum and maximum. Now I'm going to use this formula. Obviously here the x prime times x minus 1, that's going to be exactly the same matrix in here, that the inverse of x prime times x, and we're going to identify one by one, right, accordingly. All right, so let's start. I'm going to move to Excel. Okay, so I'm going to start by defining x0. All right, so x0 here will be, always start with 1, then you're going to put the value of x1, which is 10%, and then you're going to put the value of the chloride x2, which is 0.09. so this is going to be your vector x0. Now I need to define as well the vector b, all right, and that is going to be the term of the coefficients. So this is, I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it over here, right, and zoom in. Okay, so this is what is called the vector b. All right, now if you want to calculate the y hat, which we calculate over here earlier, so that's the y hat estimate. So the way to do it is, so again, this is y hat. The way to do it is multiplying two matrices or two vectors, and the function we're going to use is multiplication of matrices, mm, and that's the function we're going to use, multiplication of two matrices. And what we're going to use, we're going to use the transpose right now function of x0, which is this one, and close it. Then we're going to multiply it by the coefficient b, which is this one, those. And you notice here, this is a faster way to get the y hat, right? So that's how you calculate the y hat. So this is the formula, just for reference. The mean at the point x0 estimate, so it's going to be x0 prime, that the transpose, times beta hat, and that the coefficient, right? And what we did here in this, you can see it. So the first multiply, that's a multiplication of matrices. The transpose and the blue matrix, so the blue matrix is obviously x0, and the transpose is basically you turn the rows of a matrix into columns, right? Something used for multiplication of matrices. And the red one here is the coefficient beta or b, what we called here. So that's the matrix column, which is the values right here. So really we cannot multiply x0 times b directly, so we needed the transpose of x0 times b in order to get the value, right? And that's basically it. So now we want to proceed with the value x prime times x in order to get this matrix over here, similar at least, right, with our data. So how can we do this? So first of all, you need to define your x, matrix x. And the matrix x is nothing else than the value of the x's. I'm going to select all the value of the x's. Okay, I'm going to copy them and paste them over here. I'm going to skip first column, so I'm going to put it here. All right, the reason I skipped the first column because the x's always has to start with 1 and then 1 as a column. All right, that's how we define the x. So we can extend this, so all first column should be 1. Now what we want to do is we want to calculate the x prime. Again, x prime means a transpose, all right, and times the matrix x, which is this one. So we're gonna start equal sign, and then we're gonna do for multiplication. We get m multiply, so we're gonna use the tab, get that function, and then we're gonna use the transpose function. So transpose, all right, we're gonna use the tab to select the first one and select the matrix x. So transpose of the matrix x, first one, and then close the parentheses and then comma. Right now we're gonna put the second matrix, which is x, and we select the same matrix x. All right, we close the parentheses and enter. Okay, so this is our matrix. So let me put so multiplication of matrices, transpose of the matrix x times the matrix x, right? And those are the values of x prime times x. Now what we did so far is x prime times x, and let me remind you about the formula. We don't really need x prime times x in our calculation. What we need, so we get this part here, we get the x0, already know it, we know the transpose, we know what is it of this one. So what we need the x minus 1, right? So x prime times x minus 1, right, the inverse. So here I'm gonna add another matrix, and this is inverse of x prime times, and all right, this is really easy. You start with m inverse, and you see it right here, m inverse function, right? Select it. So that's matrix inverse, and then you select the whole matrix that you want to inverse it, close the parentheses. Again, that's the syntax, m inverse, and enter. So this is the inverse matrix that we got right now. All right, so far we get all this. Now I'm going to rewrite this because this is the sigma squared. So what I'm going to do, sigma hat squared, square root, you're going to cancel out, and this is going to be square root of x0 transpose times x prime times x inverse times x0. So now I'm going to just do this operation, everything together, and I'm going to do it in a couple of steps, right? So the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to calculate x0. We're going to multiply it by parentheses, and that's going to be x prime times x inverse, which is exponents minus 1, and then we're going to multiply it by the x0. Okay, so here I forgot to put the prime, the transpose, and the multiplication I'm going to start with is a multiplication of two matrices, because in Excel you can multiply only two matrices at a time, and we have three matrices there. So I'm going to start with multiplication, select it, and I'm going to select the transpose of x0. So this is x0, remember, x0 is right here, right? So I'm going to select x0 and transpose, right? So I start with transpose first, transpose selected with a tab, and then you're going to select x0, which is these values here. Close the parentheses. Okay, and then select the second matrix. The second matrix should be the inverse this matrix over here that we calculated already. Close the parentheses and enter. So we get a row of numbers. I'm going to go back to this value here, open it, and then this is one matrix. I'm going to do another multiplication. So and select with a tab. I'm going to open a parenthesis for you. That's one matrix, and you go all the way to the end and you put a comma, and the second matrix, it should be the x0. All right, so you're going to select x0 as it is without a transposer here. Right, select x0 and you close the parentheses. So this became only one number, and this is the value that you see it right here, and there's a square root. So this is the same value. Okay, so we get the hardest part. Now what we're gonna do, we wanna define the other variables, right? So the sigma hat here, that is the standard of error, and this is given to you by Excel on the top. Do you see it here, standard error? All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it here under it. It's going to be equals. Then I'm going to select it from here, standard error. This is the value, enter. So I get the standard error. So this is as well is done. Now I'm going to calculate T alpha 2n minus p. So 2n minus p is the degree of freedom basically, and I'm looking for the T value. So I'm going to put here T alpha divided by 2. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the T table. So let me zoom in. Okay, so here I'm going to use the T function inverse. So T dot and inverse, and I'm going to see inverse to tail. I'm going to use this one instead, right? So it's asking me about the probability. So the probability will be the alpha value. Since you are looking for the 95 percentile, so whatever remaining is alpha. So 95, it means 100 minus 95%, you're going to be 5%. So 0.05, comma, and the degree of freedom, you can find it on Excel as well. So if you go back to your table, you're going to be degree of freedom here, that's residual, and this is it. And this is the number. So the parentheses, go back. So to T dot inverse dot 2T, put the alpha, which is 1 minus confidence interval, which is 0.95 confidence interval. That's going to be 1 minus 0.95, you're going to be 0.05, and then you put degree of freedom of residual, and that's going to be the value of the T alpha over 2. Right, so now the next value, we get this. I think we get everything. So this is the value that we estimated earlier, right? We can estimate here the half interval, right? So half interval. So the half interval is what I'm going to refer to it in the formula by this value over here. In other words, if I multiply every value here together into the formula, what's it going to be? Half of the intervals. That's mean we can add it and we can subtract it. That's the half of the interval. So let's try to calculate it. So it is half of the interval. It's going to be equals to the value of the T. We're going to multiply it by the sigma, the standard error, this one, and then we're going to multiply it by square root SQRT, open a parenthesis. So SQRT, open a parenthesis, and seems I cannot select it because it's highlighted. So I went to the next cell and then I used the arrow, and that's basically the half interval. Okay, we are almost there. So I'm gonna copy the lower and the upper, and this is the calculation here, right? Okay, so for the lower end, it will be equal sign. So according to my formula again, that's going to be the expected value that we calculated earlier, that the y hat, minus the error, all right, or minus half of the interval. So this is gonna be in here equal sign, and then we're gonna select this y hat value, then minus sign and half interval. This is the half interval. Enter. And the upper end is going to be very similar, equal sign. We're going to select the y hat value plus this time half of the interval and enter. And those are the two values. So let's plug them in and double check. I'm going to copy the lower end. You're going to go here and you want to round to one decimal place. So this is going to be 690 would be 7, and then I'm gonna copy the other one, then paste it and round to one decimal. So you're gonna be 44, it became 4.4, and that's it. Let's check. Okay, done. And next question, we're gonna do it in another video.